Welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting of the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency to order. And Chairman Cravoza could not be here today, so I'm substituting in his stead. Let the record show that 4 of the directors are present and 3 of the voting directors are present. Anybody wish to make any changes to the agenda from what we have in front of us? Seeing none, we'll deem the agenda approved. There's an opportunity for the public to make any comment on items that are on the agenda, that are not on the agenda. And if anyone wishes to come forward, please do so. Seeing none, we'll move to our consent agenda. And anyone wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve it.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We're to item 5, which is the project update. Mr. Deemer.
Chairman Marble and directors, we had a meeting just 3 weeks ago. We had a very extensive presentation at that meeting, so this afternoon I just wanted to highlight a couple of key things that have occurred and are transpiring in the intervening 3 weeks. With respect to project funding, we continue to pursue the SRF loan, low interest loans and grant funding. Just this past week, we were notified that our project has been added to the Clean Water SRF as an additional project on their priority funding list. You have a handout at your places that describes that information and shows on the last page the table where we've been added. So that's very good news. As you just approved on your consent calendar, the surface water supply project is highly ranked on the West Side Integrated Regional Water Management. So we'll be following that grant application carefully over the next couple of months. And again, as mentioned at the last meeting, there is $10 million that has been included in grant funding for the joint intake to the state match to our already committed federal funds. And we'll be meeting with the Department of Water Resources in the next couple of weeks to determine the process that they will use to distribute those funds to us. With respect to land and right-of-way acquisitions, we do continue to meet with Yolo County regarding the encroachment permit in particular. We had a very positive meeting with the county administrator and his assistant on July the 9th. We talked about a concept where we would have our DBO contractor install the pipe in Road 103, and then the county would take over responsibilities for rebuilding and repaving that project, or that road, I should say. And we also talked about opportunities to perhaps close down Road 22 for an extended period to install our raw water pipeline. And if we were able to do that, we could minimize or eliminate the property that we need from the railroad. So they were encouraging with respect to the ability for shutting down Road 22 to install the raw water pipeline, and a concept that's being developed for Road 103. So I think we're making progress with Yolo County on that encroachment permit. We continue to work on the acquisition of private property for primarily the treated water transmission pipelines, City of Davis, and the eminent domain actions. And finally, we did receive, or we anticipate, I should say, receiving our fixed price proposal from our DBO proposer, CH2M Hill, on July 30th. This is a table that you've seen before. This is the cost table that I presented at our last meeting. The estimated total project cost, $13, remains $237 million. This is the same slide that I showed you last time. And finally, our project milestone schedules. This also is the schedule that you saw at our last meeting. The one change that we've made is the rising the joint intake project in October of 2013. Now that we've secured the $10 million in grant funding. We've gone back and refined our schedule for the joint intake. Anticipate, if all goes well, we'll be advertising that project in October with an award date of January of 2014. That's a very brief report for you this afternoon. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
What's the next step on this, on the SRF funding, beyond being added to the list?
We have a meeting this week with the administrative staff at the State Board. We hope at that meeting to confirm that they have all of the information they need to complete their review of our application, and then to talk about notification and the timing for actually receiving a loan.
And is the entire amount there that's indicated, the $193 million, what is anticipated from this, from that side of the SRF funding?
Yes, that amount reflects all of the money that we have spent and that we anticipate spending on the regional facilities. It does not include the local facilities. When we met with them several weeks ago, they suggested to us that we ought to scope the application to include the regional facilities, so that's what we've done, and that's the figure that they've included in the priority list.
I'm not trying to hog the questions, but I got one more here. The wastewater side of it, is that, what's the progress status of that SRF funding piece?
The one that we are talking about now is it's a bit of a misnomer. They call it the Clean Water SRF, which is the wastewater SRF. On the Safe Drinking Water Act SRF or the Potable Water SRF, we have submitted an application. You know, they've had some trouble with their distribution of funding. We are anticipating a letter for the City of Woodland indicating their project eligibility because of their nitrate contamination problems. On the Davis side, there's the issue of consolidation in order to qualify. They have provided the City of Davis with some conditions. You know, Herb Niederberger can speak more to that, but those are the parallel paths that we're on with the potable water SRF.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
In terms of the time frame when we would find out whether we're eligible for the state revolving funds and roughly what sort of magnitude we would be approved to receive, do you have a sense of when that would be? Because I know that, you know, in terms of the City of Davis, we're talking about issuing bonds fairly soon, so it'd be useful to know.
We have showed both the Clean Water and the Safe Drinking Water Act SRF staff this table, and we have consistently told them that we anticipate awarding a contract for the design, build, operate in October, and that we need to have determinations made in advance of bringing station forward to the board. They have told us they understand that and that they're going to do everything they can to meet that deadline. I think in the next, 4 weeks or so, we're going to learn a lot more in terms of the exact amount and timing of the loan offers that are going to be forthcoming.
Okay, thank you.
The overall plan, to answer your question, Brett, is, before October 16th, we want to understand fully what the loan, SRF loan amounts are for the project.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, Dennis. On your, where is Road 22 exactly? Give me that.
It's the road that starts basically at the intake facility and runs east to west just below the railroad trestle. And then it goes to where the power lines cross over.
The old Highway 16, what you talking about? Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah. I was just, my numbers were different, I'm sorry, apologize for that. And then progress with the railroads?
Director
Or
Davis, as you
not.
recall, we had the authorization to begin the eminent domain proceeding. So our attorney has had some exploratory meetings with the railroad, first of all, wanting to make sure they understood, you know, the information they had and that they understood our information. That's pretty much where it stands right now. They're preparing to take the next step in terms of, you know, filing papers, et cetera. If we are successful in getting the road closure on 22, Old Road 16, then we may significantly reduce the amount of, which would help that process.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 6.
Yes, board members, as shown on our schedule that's on the right now, we hope to be in a position to bring a recommendation to the board regarding the award of a design build operate contract to you in October. We also have a requirement in our RFP that the design build operate team, CH2M Hill, submit a bid on July 30th, submit their bid on July 30th, and we do not currently have a board meeting scheduled for August. So what this recommendation and staff reports contemplates is our receiving that bid, our making initial determination that it is responsive, and have authorization from the board based on receiving a responsive bid to enter into negotiations with CH2M Hill, position the agency to have a consideration of the service contract award in October. That's the overview and the purpose behind the staff report, and Dick Shanahan, additional comments on the recommendation.
Good afternoon, directors. In your agenda packet, there's a detailed staff report that the manager and I have worked up, and I'll just hit a few highlights of that. It was back in October 2010 when this board evaluated different design, construction, operate, contract procurement alternatives, and you directed staff to proceed with a particular alternative under Government Code Section 5956, which is somewhat different than the ordinary contract path followed by the two cities. And since that time, the agency staff and its facilities procurement committee have been through a very detailed process that's outlined in the staff report. One of the key factors about 5956 is it authorizes a local agency such as Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency to enter into a contract for design, construction, and operation pursuant to a competitive negotiation process. The statute never defines what competitive negotiation process is, and the staff report outlines, by comparison to some other statutes, what it means and how it applies under our facts. With the recent withdrawal by CDM a few weeks ago, and as the manager explained, leaving us with an apparent single proposer to submit by the end of the month, that then caused staff to take a look just to confirm that in this 2.5, almost 3-year process we've been on, have we undertaken a competitive negotiation process? And the staff report shows our conclusion that yes, we have, and it explains in detailed facts why we think that's the case. Significantly, a couple of things I'd just like to point out. First of all is that this has indeed been a process. We started with the world of bidders available and interested. We went to, had 5 statements of qualification. That was down to 3. Then Veolia withdrew, unfortunately, in December, and CDM a couple weeks ago. So it's been quite a process over 2.5 years with substantial involvement of a wide variety of firms and companies interested in competing on this project. In December, when we got the news about Veolia, agency staff, the general manager and the engineers and the facilities procurement committee did a substantial effort to try to generate additional interest, recognizing that even the 2 proposers, it'd be preferable to have 3. So they really shook the bushes to try to find additional qualified companies, and despite those efforts, we were unsuccessful at this late stage getting other companies to step in. The other significant change that happened is a couple months ago the board approved RFP addendum number 1, and that addendum did some significant things. First of all, it has established a maximum price ceiling We wanted to get a firm RFP criterion out there to the bidders that you know, our requirement is your bid must come in under a specified maximum price ceiling that's set forth in the addendum. That price ceiling was generated by the FPC and the manager based on expected cost savings through this alternative DBO procurement process. The other thing we did there in this competitive negotiation process, we learned that the teams would be subcontracting a substantial amount of their work and services, both for subcontracting for construction as well as services and purchase of materials and equipment. And we imposed some procurement plan requirements on the prospective bidders that would require them to competitively price and negotiate these sort of second-tier contracts and pricing, and that requirement was imposed by addendum number 1. And it also imposed for the remaining, what we expect about 30% or so of self-performed work, we are now requiring the contractor to go through an open book process where they disclose to us through this upcoming negotiation phase, you know, how they arrived at their various prices for things, and imposes an obligation on the contractor to demonstrate that the prices are fair and reasonable and competitive. So through those mechanisms, you know, staff feels very comfortable that we have, number one, complied with the statutory requirement of there being a competitive negotiation process to this date. And secondly, on top of that, we've taken some measures that we think will ensure for the agency and the ratepayers that the price we eventually get from our remaining proposer will be a very fair and competitive price. Also included in the agenda packet is a proposed resolution that does, you know, two things. One is it follows up on what the manager recommended, and that is to authorize staff to take the next step in this DBO procurement process, and that is to undertake negotiations with CH2M Hill after receipt of its final price proposal between now and July 30th. And then those negotiations will go on, and we've calendared a October 10th board meeting for a hopeful presentation of a final contract to you. And then the second thing the resolution does is we ask the board to memorialize for the record that yes, to this stage we have had competitive negotiation, and the resolution, as you see, makes some findings to that effect. So staff now recommends that the board take the next step and approve the proposed resolution. We recognize it's a major step on the board's behalf. It is a significant step, and requires certainly your careful deliberation. And then finally, the last thing I want to add is to make it clear that what you're not doing today, what you're not being asked to do today, is to approve a contract with the contractor. That will come back to you at a later meeting currently scheduled for October 10th. And with that, the staff report has a lot more detail, and I'll just pause here to see if you have any questions.
Brett, any questions? Sid?
The items that were in the addendum were all about construction-related expenses and limiting those and having open book. But what about the price of the water during the operation? Is that somehow controlled, or so you don't move costs later into the process somehow? How is that protected against?
Well, there were two price limits that included both the design-build phase as well as the operations phase. So we did put in there a requirement that the maximum price ceiling covered both phases of the work, and then secondly, this open book review that will be undertaken in this upcoming contract negotiation phase will include just that issue, that we will look at the pricing during the operations phase and delve into how those costs were derived at.
Thank you.
No further questions. We take comments from the public.
Yes, sir.
Any member of the public wish to make comment on this item? State your name and where you're from, and have at it.
Matt Williams from El Macero. member of the Davis Water Advisory Committee, but speaking here as an individual citizen. I, as an individual, do believe that we have seen a competitive process. The problem is that my perception may not be the perception of other people. So I think that there's some very important steps that need to be done in order to make sure that a perception that I may have can be easily accessible for others. The first is that in the authorization that you're about to entertain, I would only authorize to enter those negotiations if the bid that is submitted is equal to or less than the maximum that we have specified. I think that the reaction of the citizens, if you enter negotiations with a bid that doesn't meet, you're going to run into a significant community reaction. The second thing is that I think that the homework that was done to produce this staff report should be memorialized in something that is visual, that shows how there has been a progression down the line from what the original expectations of cost were down to the point where we are, the controls that are in the contract and the like. One sheet, very visual, so that citizens can see the results in a one sheet of paper that we've just heard the words said by the council. So I believe that those are things that outreach-wise you need to do in order to make sure that the people who haven't been following this as closely as all the rest of us have will quickly understand that, in fact, it has been a competitive process and that it has reached an end that is in the best interest of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your input. Anyone else from the public wishing to make comment? If not, we'll bring it back to this group, and perhaps I think we're all concerned, Dennis, about the public perception. Appreciate Matt bringing that up. What would you like to comment on those two suggestions?
I think it's a good suggestion. We have presented in the past visuals that show how the total project costs have come down over time. It does make a very compelling case. We've also put together some timelines over the 2.5 years that show how the process has narrowed the number of DBO teams down to CH Twin Hill. So what I would suggest is we take those two pieces as starting blocks, maybe work with Kim Floyd and see if we can't get some information both on our website and available for the public that might be interested.
Okay. And I think regarding item 1, which he suggested, I believe that is already part and parcel with the resolution that we're adopting.
That's correct. We've got that covered in the terms of the resolution.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments from this group or questions?
Well, my concern is probably more where the contract goes out than where the bid comes in. In that sense, that if the bid comes in a little different, a little higher, doesn't mean we're going to award it, but it's opportunity for negotiations to get it down to the contract price. So we've been very clear about what we're willing to do and what we can and can't do with our constituents. So, you know, I know it's a fine line, a public perception, but, you know, bids are meant to be negotiated. So, thank you.
Well, we've be perfectly clear, we have stated that it must come in at or below our price in order to be responsive. And your action that we're asking you to take today contemplates that to be the case. If it doesn't come in as responsive and meeting all of our criteria, we'll have to get back and discuss our next steps. But we're confident, based on all the work that we've been doing, that we are going to get a responsive bid.
Yeah, I think, and please correct me if I'm misstating something here, Dennis or Richard, but my recollection was that prior to our adopting that resolution requiring 20% below engineer's estimate, that we had conversations with the then existing DBO teams with indications that yes, we would be able to meet that requirement.
That's correct. We did have conversations, and we did discuss the content of the proposed addendum, and so we've progressed past that point.
Good. Okay. Any other, Sid? You good?
Yes, I am, yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Dennis, because, yeah, I was particularly interested in the item 1 that Matt had brought up. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any further questions, so we need to entertain one motion or two?
One motion to adopt the recommended resolution.
Okay. It's been moved. We have a second?
Oh, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the resolution authorizing the general manager to negotiate a water project design, build, operate service contract with the most favored design, build, operate proposer, as is indicated. All those in favor?
Make a brief discussion point.
Yeah.
I guess it's just to reemphasize the point here is that what we were authorizing is for Dennis to enter into negotiations, provided the bid is responsive, and then we get it back in October, roughly, to actually have the final yes or no. So what we're doing today is not agreeing to a contract or letting Dennis agree to a contract. It's really, Dennis is going to do work on behalf of us, and then we will get sort of the final yes-no in the fall, if I understand correctly.
That's
I think
correct.
that's how I understand it, so thank you. Very good. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. And we'll move to the remaining items.
Number 7 is our long-range board calendar. This is for the board's information. As indicated, we do not currently have a board meeting scheduled for August. Our next meeting would be in Woodland on September the 12th, and the meeting that we've already talked about, October the 10th, here in Davis.
Very good. Any correspondence or technical advisory committee comments that need to be brought forward? Any items from members of this board you'd like to comment on? I'd just like to make one comment. We've briefly discussed previously the West Side Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. That plan, which encompasses 5 county areas and includes Yolo County in that plan, was adopted by the Water Resources Association as the signing entity representing Yolo County and representing this agency and its constituents, and goes before the other agencies shortly, or may have already had some of those agencies adopt it. This is important to this agency, and we'll come back to this agency, as I understand it, because we have a proposal as part of that plan for several $1 million of funding for this water agency through the Prop 84 funds. So just want to highlight that we're moving forward on regional fronts as well as this front to secure the maximum possible benefit to our ratepayers that we can. All right, any other comments? Yes.
I just want to say thank you, Dennis, for appearing at our Davis City Council meeting a few weeks ago to answer questions about the process. I know that I found it very helpful, and I believe that the public and my colleagues did as well. So thank you for taking the time to do that.
Very good. I think it also needs to be stated, since Brett started that, that we do thank the staff who have worked so tirelessly on this SRF funding. This is huge. We who've been involved in it know how huge it will be, and we certainly hope for the best in that regard, which will be a great benefit as well to our ratepayers. So thank you, all of you. We know the cities have worked hard on this as well. All right, being no further business, the meeting is adjourned till our next meeting. Thank you.